I never thought that lunch at Olive Garden would end with my dignity boxed up like leftovers. Kevin, my son-in-law, sat across from me with that salesman's grin, the one that never quite reached his eyes. He waited until the waiter set down the complimentary breadsticks, then slid a glossy brochure across the table like he was handing me a cruise catalog. But I knew, by the way my daughter wouldn't meet my gaze, and by the way Kevin leaned back, arms stretched out over the booth like he owned the place, that this wasn't an offer. It was a sentence. "You'll love the new nursing home," he said, like he was announcing dessert. "They even have crochet classes. We already made the deposit." My hand hovered above the pasta I'd barely touched. I looked down at the words in gold script, Silver Pines Assisted Living, and below that, an image of a white woman smiling into a chessboard. It didn't look like me. It didn't feel like me, but my name was on the brochure, handwritten in blue ink beside reserved April 12th. I turned the page. There it was, a $5,000 deposit, charged to their joint card, already paid. I glanced at my daughter Allison, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Just sat there picking at her salad like this was normal, like this hadn't just ended something permanent between us. "Kevin says you'll have your own room, Mama," she added finally, voice high and brittle. "You won't have to worry about stairs or your prescriptions. It's all handled." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than a scream. I sat there as the pasta cooled, as Kevin talked about transition timelines, as Allison nodded on cue like she was in a real estate showing. Somewhere between the cheesecake menu and the check, I stopped being their mother. I became their liability. But I smiled when I stood up. A tight, practiced smile. I folded the brochure in half, slipped it into my purse next to my keys, and excused myself to the ladies' room. That smile was the last thing they'd get from me for free. What they didn't see, what they never thought to look for, was that I had already made my own reservations. But not at Silver Pines. I left the restaurant through the side door. They didn't even notice. That evening, I stood in the quiet of my own living room, the Olive Garden brochure still folded in my bag like a splinter under skin. The light outside had gone soft, washing through the windows in that late April hue Atlanta knows so well, blue gold, and fading. I took off my earrings, unzipped my shoes, and walked barefoot over the hardwood I had polished myself just last week. They thought I was forgetful. They smirked when I asked about the paperwork they'd submitted on my behalf. Kevin even chuckled under his breath, low and smug, when I fumbled momentarily with my reading glasses. But I hadn't forgotten who I was. I crossed the room and picked up the gold frame that had sat on my bookshelf for 20 years. It held my teaching certificate, crisp and steady beneath the glass. Georgia Professional Standards Commission, Certified Educator, History, grades 6 to 12, Booker T. Washington High School, 1984 to 2017. 33 years. 33 years of shaping other people's children, holding classrooms together when the roof leaked and the textbooks didn't come, when the superintendent changed and the budget vanished, when no one said thank you. I didn't just teach. I mentored. I guarded. I showed up every day, even when my back ached and my husband's health started to go. The certificate was proof that I'd earned more than just a retirement. I'd earned respect. That had weight, even if they pretended it didn't. I sat at the kitchen table, logged into my teacher's credit union account. Yes, I remembered the password and reviewed my annuity. The principal stood at $187,000. Kevin and Allison likely thought it was half that. They'd always assumed I was just scraping by, stretching my pension like wax paper. But I had been saving, investing quietly, because I knew better than to bet on gratitude. I didn't need to shout it from rooftops. My numbers spoke for me. I printed the current balance and placed it beside my certificate on the table. 2 documents, one for what I gave to others, one for what I kept for myself. They wanted to put me away, but I was just now stepping into focus. The next morning unfolded like any other before the brochure changed everything. I woke at 6, as always, brewed my coffee with a splash of condensed milk, and opened the blinds just enough to let the lace curtains catch the light. The east-facing windows in my living room, faded slightly at the hem, turned soft gold when the sun hit just right. That room had watched me age, yes, but it had also watched me live. It had held birthday cakes, prayer circles, and, not so long ago, Kevin and Allison's engagement party. I remembered Allison helping me string lights across the curtain rod, laughing in that loose way she used to, before her laughter began to sound rehearsed. I carried the watering can to each plant as if they were elders in a congregation, my rubber tree in the corner, the pothos curling along the bookshelf, the violets on the sill that only bloomed when nobody was watching. I talked to them gently. They didn't answer, but they had never lied to me either. By 8, I was back at the kitchen table, logged into the pension portal again, not because I needed to double check, but because I needed the reminder. The deposit had come through right on time, $2,315, just like every month since I retired. The little green check mark next to completed grounded me more than any medication could have. Whatever stories Kevin spun about my declining clarity, my memory worked just fine where it mattered. Then the phone buzzed. A text thread from Allison blinked onto the screen. "Morning, Mama. Try to pack only essentials, okay? Don't stress. We'll bring boxes later this week. Love you, 2 hearts." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no question mark, no offer, no room for reply. Just a directive dressed up in emojis. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Sister Clara. The line crackled once before she answered with her usual warmth and a throatful of gospel. "Clara," I said, steadying my voice, "I might need prayer. And maybe more than that." She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'm here, baby. You just say when." And for the first time in 2 days, I breathed without bracing for what might come next. As I sat by the window, a breeze lifting the hem of the curtains, my mind wandered backward, before the text messages, before the brochure, before Allison's eyes started looking through me instead of at me. I found myself in my old kitchen, the one from before I sold the house on Windrush Lane. The cabinets were honey oak, the floor creaked near the fridge, and the morning light always caught the rim of the toaster. It was April then, too, but 2019. Allison had called, her voice syrup-sweet, but thick with something else. "Mama," she'd said, "Kevin and I found a place. Real starter home. Just needs a little help with the paperwork. Would you?" Of course I said yes. That's what mothers do. We put our names on the line before our children even know how to spell them. I remember sitting at the counter, laptop open, glasses perched on the bridge of my nose, scanning the email from Regions Bank. The loan approval came through for a $260,000 property on Oak Glen Drive, an up-and-coming area, Kevin said. The email listed my full name beside Kevin's as guarantor. "Standard formality," he told me, squeezing my shoulder with a grin that was all tooth and no root. Back then, his thank you sounded warm, even grateful. He brought over a bottle of wine and some grocery store flowers, laid them on the counter like offerings. But looking back now, I realize his eyes were already measuring. Not the kitchen. Me. My usefulness. The house was cute enough, I suppose. 3 bedrooms. Open concept kitchen. A narrow backyard that Kevin claimed he'd turn into a garden but never did. They moved in before the paint dried. I brought them a lasagna and a set of mixing bowls. Regret is a quiet ghost. It doesn't knock, doesn't wail. It just sits beside you when the house is still, whispering all the ways you mistook duty for wisdom. I thought I was giving them a foundation. I didn't see the trap I was building with my own hands. That house is still in their name. But the debt? That part wears mine. That night, April 6th, long after the neighborhood had gone quiet and the wind had started brushing softly against the window panes, I sat down at the dining table and pulled out my leather-bound planner. It still smelled faintly of lavender, from the sachets I kept in the desk drawer. The surface of the table was scarred in places, rings from teacups, faint ink smudges from years of grading essays, but it had always been my space for sorting truth from noise. This time, the truth came in numbers. I opened the manila folder I kept in the file drawer, under F Family. Inside were the check stubs, withdrawal slips, Venmo printouts, and Zelle confirmations, each labeled by year and clipped with care. Allison and Kevin had always called it helping out, said it like it was communal, like we were all just pitching in towards some greater good. But I had the receipts, literally. I used my calculator, the kind with the tape roll that clicks and clacks like a courtroom stenographer, punching in numbers that felt like bruises. First, the $4,200 for the HVAC repair when their system died in February 2018. Then the $1,500 for Allison's dental work. $3,000 for Kevin's business launch that launched nothing. Monthly emergency transfers that blurred into each other. $800 here, $600 there. The rent shortfall months. The Christmas splurges they couldn't cover. A plane ticket to his cousin's wedding in Denver. Groceries just until payday. I ran the final total 3 times, then stapled it to the top of the folder. $42,780. $42,780. Enough for a second retirement. Enough to buy the freedom they now claimed I was too fragile to manage. The anger didn't come like fire. It came like pressure. A slow tightening in my chest and jaw. Not because I had given so much. I had done it with an open heart. But because they had turned that heart into a credit line, one they assumed would never close. I called Ms. Deidre Holt, my accountant for the past 15 years. Left her a message. Deidre, it's me. I think it's time we have a different kind of meeting. And I meant it. The next morning brought an eerie stillness to the house, the kind that settles only when a storm is gathering. I moved slowly through my routine, but something in the air felt off, as if the house itself had begun listening. When I stepped into the office, I saw the blinking green light on the printer. Paper jam, I thought, but when I lifted the lid, there they were. Forms. Estate forms, half-filled. 2 pages still warm to the touch. The top page was a durable power of attorney draft, with all the key fields typed in already. My name, my birth date, and in the blank for authorized agent, Kevin R. Cole. There was no date, no signature, but someone had already chosen the font. I stood there staring at that line, that name, typed onto a document that would have handed over my life like a grocery list. The ink might not have dried, but the intention had. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me as I opened the rest of the stack. A preliminary healthcare directive. A list of current assets with curious little valuations scribbled in Allison's handwriting. A printout of my annuity estimate from the teacher's credit union. The exact figure I had looked at just 2 days before, now replicated here without my knowledge. She must have accessed my files when I left the office door open last week. They'd been planning this. Last week, Allison had come by with that practice smile, saying she'd help organize my papers so I wouldn't be overwhelmed. I'd chalked it up to daughterly concern until now. Concern didn't come with unsigned legal drafts. I picked up my phone and took a series of photos, time-stamped, backing each file up to my private cloud. I then slid every sheet into a new envelope marked with today's date. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the clarity of it all. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't love disguised as caution. It was an extraction. They weren't waiting for me to decline. They were building a case to declare me obsolete. I turned off the printer and closed the office door gently, the way you might shut a room where something holy had just died. 2 days later, the doorbell rang at 9:03 a.m. sharp, the chime slicing through my quiet like a blade. I opened the door to find Kevin on the front steps, arms already full of flattened moving boxes, Allison behind him clutching a clipboard and a roll of tape. No greetings. No questions. Just that awful cheerfulness that always feels worse than a raised voice. We figured we'd get an early start, Kevin said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Don't want to leave everything to the last minute. Allison gave me a bright, practiced smile as she followed him in, eyes darting to the living room like she was taking inventory. Just the essentials for now, Mama, she chirped. Clothes, toiletries, documents. Kevin's got the rest scheduled with the movers on Thursday. They moved quickly, too quickly. setting down boxes near the hallway and flipping open cabinet doors with the assurance of people who no longer felt like guests. Kevin was already directing traffic, to no one but himself, as if this house had always belonged to him. Start with the bedrooms. We'll label everything. Mama, you can rest while we sort. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I stood in the center of my own foyer, heart hammering a tight rhythm under my ribs. My name was still on the deed, my slippers still by the door, but they were treating me like a visitor overstaying her welcome. The doorbell chimed again. Mr. Lang, my next-door neighbor, his phone raised discreetly in one hand. He said nothing, but gave me a nod that carried more than words. He had seen them arrive. He had already started recording. My own doorbell cam would capture it too. Kevin, walking in uninvited, Allison opening drawers, them pointing and listing and boxing without consent. They thought they were being efficient. They were being documented. They didn't notice the envelope on the dining table, the one I'd labeled unopened, unauthorized. They didn't ask if I needed help or what I wanted to keep. They just moved like people settling into an inheritance. But I was still standing, and I wasn't boxed up yet. By the time they left, late that afternoon, the house felt hollow in strange places. My jewelry box open, my dresser drawers half filled, the air thick with lavender and intrusion. I went into my bedroom, already knowing what I would find, but still hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. The jewelry box sat ajar like a wound, its contents gutted. The velvet lining, once layered with pins, bangles, my mother's locket, and the gold earrings I wore at Allison's christening, lay bare except for a single broken clasp and a lone stud earring. Pieces that had lived with me longer than either of them had walked this earth, gone. Allison's voice rang in my memory. I moved the valuables already, Mama, just for safekeeping. You wouldn't want things to get misplaced in the shuffle. Safekeeping. As if I were the threat. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to hold the nausea down. My hands, once so steady in a classroom full of restless teenagers, now trembled, not from age, but from the sheer gall of it. I had offered them heirlooms and trust, not silence. This was theft wrapped in care. The phone buzzed beside me. A forwarded screenshot from Deidre Holt. My accountant had flagged an alert from Allison's bank account. April 10th, 12:46 p.m. A withdrawal of $8,200. Same day they'd been in my house. Same window of time. Same sick feeling in my gut. The jewelry had been appraised and insured years ago. State Farm, Mrs. Tony's office on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard. She'd walked through my home personally, noted each item, recorded serial numbers and stone settings. I found the file easily, thick with appraisals, copies of the rider policy, and the photo sheet she'd taken. I scanned it all and saved a fresh backup to my encrypted drive. They weren't just robbing me of things. They were erasing stories. The necklace my mother wore to vote for the first time. The bracelet my husband bought when he landed his teaching job. Allison knew. She knew what each piece meant, and took them anyway. The fury was cold now, clear, focused. They wanted to dismantle me quietly, but I don't break in pieces. I document. The next morning, I smiled. Not because anything had gotten better, but because I'd finally decided to let them think they'd won. Sometimes, the most strategic move a woman can make is to sit still and appear agreeable. So when Allison called to confirm the facility visit, I softened my voice and said the words she wanted to hear. Of course, baby, it'll be good to see the place. Her relief came through the phone in a single exhale, followed by chirped logistics and faux concern. What to wear, how to behave, which parts of the facility she thought I'd really love. She talked fast, thinking momentum would carry her across the finish line before I noticed the terrain beneath her was starting to shift. By 1 p.m., we were in the lobby of Silver Pines Assisted Living, an over-perfumed building with soft jazz piped through hidden speakers, and a front desk staffed by a smiling woman named Gloria. Allison signed us in, a little too enthusiastically, and Kevin strutted beside her as if he were negotiating a corporate lease instead of arranging a mother's exile. I let them walk ahead, watched them beam at the recreational calendar on the corkboard, bingo Thursdays, chair yoga, something called mindful coloring. Kevin patted the brochure in his pocket and whispered, "We already confirmed your tour, Ma. It's just a formality at this point." He handed it to me like a passport. A new identity. One I hadn't applied for. The brochure bore a neat red checkmark. Tour completed, April 12th. Gloria initialed beside it without thinking. I thanked her quietly. She had no idea her signature would serve me later. Not as an approval, but as proof of performance. I nodded through the rest of the walkthrough, murmuring appreciation for the private kitchenette and adjustable beds. I even smiled when Allison whispered, "Isn't this better than worrying about bills?" Better? No, but necessary. For now. What they saw was cooperation. What I was building, silently and methodically, was consent on paper, shadowed by intent they'd never imagine. Let them think I was folding. Let them feel safe, because safety breeds mistakes. And I only needed one. That night, the house held its breath with me. I didn't turn on the television or pour a glass of wine. I sat at the kitchen table in the kind of silence that sharpens you. It was midnight, April 12th turning into April 13th, and the only sound was the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old wood, remembering how long it had held me up. My laptop sat open before me, glowing like an altar. I had already pulled the necessary tabs. Delta Airlines, Freedom Trust of Georgia. The secure folder I kept tucked deep in the cloud marked Legacy Do Not Delete. The last message from Kevin buzzed onto my phone at 11:07 p.m., final move day. Tomorrow 9 a.m., Allison's packing your meds and bathroom stuff. Love you, Ma. Love. Weaponized. I didn't reply. Instead, I clicked through flights to Kingston, Jamaica. One way. Non-refundable. Departure, April 15th, 6:05 a.m. Hartsfield-Jackson Gate F3. Seat 14A, aisle. I chose that destination not just for the distance, but because I had friends there, retired teachers from the district who'd made the move and never looked back. I'd even helped one of them, Miss Priscilla, set up her garden when she first landed. The ticket cost $486. I paid from the discretionary account Allison didn't know existed. A quiet corner of my finances set aside for exactly this. Not emergency, but escape. Then I picked up the phone and called Mr. Baines, my longtime travel agent, a man who'd booked every conference, funeral, and anniversary trip I'd ever taken. "You finally ready?" he asked, like he'd been expecting this call. "More than ready," I said. "Confirmed. Check your inbox. I've sent the itinerary and a digital boarding pass. No one can cancel it but you." The confirmation arrived before we even hung up. I printed a copy and tucked it into my purse, right beside the Silver Pines brochure. 2 itineraries, 1 fake future, 1 real exit. As I shut the laptop, I felt something deep in my chest shift. Not the tightness of fear, but the hollow releasing of permission. I didn't need a rescue. I needed distance. And now I had it. At precisely 8:15 the next morning, I walked into the Teachers Credit Union branch on Cascade Road, dressed in the same slate blue blazer I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences. Monica Reed, the senior banker with cornrows tucked neatly into a bun, looked up from her desk and smiled like she'd been waiting just for me. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, rising. "You're early." "Not a second too early," I replied. She guided me into the small, glass-walled office in the corner, away from the main lobby and its idle chatter. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, I handed her the folder marked M. Johnson Living Trust Formation Documents. Everything had been prepped over the past 2 weeks in secret meetings. I'd met with a trust attorney, referred by Ms. Holt, and reviewed every clause, every stipulation, every power reserved. This wasn't just a shell account. It was a full transfer of control. Every dollar from my pension annuity, savings, and checking rolled into a new trust where I was sole trustee and only beneficiary. A fortress made of paper. Monica reviewed the paperwork with sharp efficiency. "This gives you full discretion," she confirmed. "No outside access. No co-signers. No joint beneficiaries. You're the only name on file now. I nodded once. That was the point. She notarized each page, stamped and initialed with care. When she slid the final confirmation across the desk, I signed without hesitation. A new account number, new PIN, new security questions, everything freshly minted and protected. My old accounts, the ones Allison used for auto payments and Kevin borrowed from when cash was tight, had been formally dissolved. All activity frozen as of 8:03 a.m., Monica looked at me with something close to reverence. "You're not the first client to sit across from me like this," she said quietly. "But you're the only one who came in with a plan." I tucked the trust packet into my purse, right beside the Delta confirmation and the jewelry insurance scans. I'd spent years teaching others how to take control of their stories. Now I was finally writing mine. Not in ink, in signatures. At 9:45 a.m., I stood beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of the FedEx print and scan off Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, clutching a USB drive in one hand and a manila envelope of originals in the other. The place smelled like toner and industrial carpet. The young man behind the counter, Jason, according to his badge, looked barely old enough to vote, but he smiled politely when I asked for help scanning. "I've got time," he said, sliding open the scanner tray. "Take as long as you need." I laid out each document with care, like I was setting down sacred pages. The trust paperwork from Monica, the full appraisal list from Mrs. Tony at State Farm, digital photos of the missing jewelry with timestamps, the deed to my condo, still solely in my name, plus the 2019 loan approval email from Regions Bank, my signature glaring up beside Kevin's. The scan bar hummed with each pass, pixel by pixel, recording everything they'd hoped would stay invisible. Then came the extras, the check copies from years of help, each annotated in Deidre Holt's neat accountant's script. Birthday loans, rent supplements, emergency transfers, all dated, all matched to deposit records. I added the Silver Pines brochure with Gloria's signature from the lobby and the draft power of attorney I found on my printer, blank but damning. Each file saved to a master folder on the USB Legacy Docs 2025. I backed it up twice, once to a cloud server and again to my email, sent to myself under the subject line, "Do not delete." Ever. Jason offered to staple the printouts, but I declined. I wanted everything loose, sortable, ready for eyes that would need to see it clearly. "You documenting something important?" he asked, eyes flicking over the pile with cautious respect. "Just making sure my story doesn't disappear," I said. He nodded, handing me the USB in its clear plastic sleeve. "Then you're doing it right." I walked out into the morning sun, the light sharp and honest. No shadows, no secrets, just proof. Collected, time-stamped, mine. They thought they'd buried the evidence in kindness. I was busy digitizing the truth. By noon, I was parked beneath the oak trees, lining the gravel lot of New Hope Baptist, the red brick steeple rising above me like an old friend. I didn't go inside. I didn't need pews or hymnals today. I needed people. I needed names I could trust in the storm. I dialed Sister Clara first. She answered on the second ring, voice warm and knowing. "I felt you on my spirit this morning," she said before I even spoke. "You all right, baby?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." She was already writing down names before I asked. Insurance contacts. A locksmith she used when her niece got tangled up in a messy divorce. Even a friend at the local courthouse who owed her more than a few favors. Clara didn't need to hear the full story. She'd seen enough families crumble under the weight of entitlement dressed as love. Next, I called Deidre Holt. The line was crisp, no background noise, just her measured voice and the click of her keyboard as she confirmed the retainer transfer. $1,200 wired that morning. "I've drafted the letters already," she said. "Cease and desist for any attempts to sell or claim your property. We'll get them served by morning." "Thank you," I whispered. I didn't have better words. "And Ms. Johnson," she added gently, "I've handled harder cases with less paper. You're doing more than protecting assets. You're reclaiming authorship." My last call was to Mr. Lang. He'd lived next door for 12 years, shared collard greens over the fence, and changed my porch light without being asked. When he picked up, I didn't even get my question out. "Got the footage saved on 2 drives," he said. "Time-stamped and backed up. If they try to claim anything different, they'll be lying to the camera." I laughed then, short, bitter, grateful. The kind of laugh that says, "Not today." The wind lifted through the trees, sending little whirlwinds of pollen dancing across my windshield. They'd wanted me isolated, dependent, cornered. Instead, I was building a circle, not of witnesses, but of warriors. And we were just getting started. By 3 that afternoon, I was sitting across from Ms. Holt in her Midtown office, a space as orderly as the woman herself. Her mahogany desk gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of peppermint and ink. Behind her, certificates lined the wall. CPA, JD, tax law specialization. Each one a quiet reminder that I'd placed my future in competent hands. She adjusted her glasses and flipped through the thick folder I'd brought, her highlighter gliding in measured strokes. "You've already done half my work," she murmured, half impressed, half astonished. "Every check, every transfer, every false document, they've left fingerprints everywhere." "I wanted no room for doubt," I said. "They think sentiment can blur a signature. It won't." She smiled at that, the kind of smile that came from years of watching women like me walk into her office late but never too late. Then she reached for her stamp, pressing it against the first cease and desist letter addressed to Kevin R. and Allison Cole, notifying them of legal representation and a freeze on any property transactions involving 2140 Cascade Avenue Southwest. Each letter went out certified, with return receipt requested. I watched her drop them into the outgoing mail bin herself, 2 quiet detonations sealed in white envelopes. She also prepared a title hold request for Fulton County Clerk's Office, case number 8821F, placing a legal freeze on the condo until all claims could be reviewed. "This ensures they can't list or transfer the property without your written consent," she explained. "Even if they try, the county will block the filing automatically." I nodded, exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. The paper shield was up. Kevin had already emailed me once that morning, angry that his access to my bank accounts had vanished. Now he would find his next move walled in too. "Let them huff and posture," Ms. Holt said, sliding the final receipt across to me. "The law doesn't care about theatrics." I tucked the receipts into my purse, their embossed seals catching the light. For the first time since that cursed lunch at Olive Garden, I felt something close to steady ground beneath my feet. Justice, still quiet, had entered the room. They came storming in just after 5. No knock, no call ahead. Just the front door flung open like a raid. Kevin's voice hit first, low and sharp. "What the hell is going on?" Followed by Allison's, high and trembling with righteous outrage. I was in the living room, still in the same chair where I'd read through Holt's filings, my phone resting quietly in my palm, already recording. I didn't stand. I didn't blink. Let them perform. "You froze our access. You humiliated us," Kevin shouted, stepping closer, camera phone already aimed like a weapon. "This is elder abuse, financial confusion, erratic behavior, refusal to engage with family decisions. We've got everything documented." Allison stayed by the doorway, wringing her hands like a stage actress on cue. "Mama, please, we're just trying to help you. You're not well. You're being manipulated by outsiders, lawyers, that church friend, people who don't know what's best for you." I looked at her then, fully. Not the girl I'd swaddled, or the bride I'd toasted, but the woman now aligning herself with someone who saw me as a hurdle to be bulldozed. Her voice shook not from fear, but from the crumbling certainty that I might actually win. "I am not confused," I said calmly, without rising. "I am not unstable. What I am is finished, with pretending you're helping when you're scheming, with paying to be mistreated." Kevin's face turned red. "You think this is mistreatment? After all we've done for you?" I laughed then. Not loud, but deep. "All you've done for me? You mean the money you siphoned? The documents you forged? The jewelry you stole under the word? Safekeeping? I have records of every move. Bank statements. withdrawal notices, video footage. And this, I raised my phone slightly, still recording, is going to the Atlanta PD domestic unit with a copy of this visit. He froze. For a moment, it was only the sound of Allison's breathing and the whir of the ceiling fan. I suggest you leave, I added, before your concern turns into trespass. And they did. Not because they were finished, but because for the first time, they understood I had receipts and power. The next morning arrived sharp and cloudless, too clean for the storm I was preparing to walk into. At exactly 10 a.m., I stepped through the glass doors of the Teachers' Credit Union on Peachtree, my binder pressed against my chest like a shield. The conference room was already set. Long oak table, water pitchers, a soft hum from the ceiling vents. This wasn't a courtroom, but it would do. Mr. Givens, the branch manager, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Everything's ready," he said, gesturing toward the far side of the room. "You have the floor." He'd agreed to host this meeting not just as a neutral party, but as a witness. The moment Allison and Kevin entered, 5 minutes late, whispering and smug, I watched them scan the room and misread the whole setup. Allison smiled too big. Kevin leaned back in the chair like he was at a settlement meeting. They thought they'd won already. "I've prepared documentation," I said evenly, sliding the binder toward the center of the table. "For your review." Kevin reached for it like it was an inheritance. I let him. He opened it expecting a signature page. What he found instead was a chronological indictment. The new trust formation, notarized and sealed. Transfer receipts with timestamps, a full ledger of bank activity showing the freeze date, photo logs of the emptied jewelry box with Mrs. Tony's appraisals attached, and a full screenshot of the group text that had included "Final move day, tomorrow 9 a.m." Each item tabbed and labeled, cross-referenced with bank account numbers and names only I could have provided. Allison's smile faltered first. Kevin flipped a page, then another, until he reached the notarized cease and desist from Ms. Holt. "You set us up," he whispered. "No," I said. "You walked in grinning." Mr. Givens cleared his throat. "These documents are legally binding, and I've confirmed each with our records." There it was. Authority. Validation. I didn't have to shout. I had receipts, witnesses, and law on my side. Let them feel the weight of it now. This wasn't a warning. This was closure. I watched their faces shift, not suddenly, but like slow erosion. First, disbelief, then confusion, then the quiet, creeping realization that everything they thought they had built on my back was now dissolving beneath them. Kevin's jaw tightened, his hands resting uselessly on the binder he could no longer control. Allison blinked fast, her throat bobbing, as if swallowing a confession she couldn't form. "I thought," she began, but the words died there. "You assumed," I said, voice low but steady, "that my silence meant surrender, that my love meant permission." I turned to Mr. Givens, who had opened a second folder, a stamped copy of the trust agreement, digital and print, notarized with his seal. He placed it beside the binder, like a final gavel. "These statements verify full ownership of all listed accounts and properties under the M. Johnson Living Trust," he said, looking from Kevin to Allison. "No pending transfers, no co-ownership, and no further access under any circumstance." Then he reached for the small recorder on the table and pressed stop. "This conversation has been recorded and added to our official record." Kevin stood suddenly, as if motion might undo the moment. "You can't just cut us out like this." I tilted my head, calm as marble. "You cut yourselves out when you tried to sell my name behind my back." Allison looked down at the page where the jewelry photos lay. Her eyes locked on a picture of the locket, my mother's, still unsold, thank God. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't speak. I closed the binder, slow and deliberate, and stood. "This was never about revenge," I said. "It's about restoration. I came here with proof, not apologies." Mr. Givens nodded. Meeting concluded. I tucked the folder beneath my arm and walked out before they could follow. I didn't need to see their exit. I had already reclaimed mine. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting sharp lines on the sidewalk. My steps were light. For once, I wasn't carrying evidence. I was carrying freedom. Documented, validated, and sealed. By the time the city was yawning awake on April 15th, I was already past security at Hartsfield-Jackson, seated at gate F3, hands wrapped around a paper cup of mint tea. The terminal buzzed around me. Business calls, boarding announcements, restless toddlers. But I felt insulated, wrapped in something deeper than noise. I was untouchable now, not because of vengeance, but because I had finished the work of reclaiming what was mine. My phone buzzed once more before boarding. A notification from my bank, Freedom Trust of Georgia. Withdrawal confirmed, $5,000. Funds transferred to a new international account I had opened quietly the week prior. The caption on the confirmation email read simply, "New beginnings." Alongside it came a second message. Not from Allison, but from my condo association. An automated alert that the unauthorized tenants, Kevin's cousin and his girlfriend, who had been quietly subletting my space, had received formal eviction notices. Locks scheduled for change at noon, new security codes already set. I'd left no cracks in the plan. The condo was mine. The accounts were sealed. The jewelry case, emptied, documented, insured, had already triggered a fraud review on Allison's account. She would answer to more than just me now. The boarding call echoed through the gate. I stood, rolled my modest carry-on behind me, and passed the attendant my boarding pass. She scanned it with a soft beep, her voice bright. "Have a beautiful flight, Ms. Johnson." I smiled, not out of habit, but from someplace earned. As I stepped onto the jet bridge, I reached into my bag and touched the items I'd chosen to bring. Passport, USB drive, trust papers, and the locket I'd managed to recover. It would hang in my new home, not as a memory of what was taken, but as proof of what I'd refused to give away. They had tried to write me out of my own life, to draft over me in signatures and sighs, but I had documented every truth, protected every boundary, and reclaimed every inch. No more explanations. No more permission.